If I was to go to your place, you invited me to your house, and when I walked in, I sat down, and you said to me, "Would you like a hot drink?" And I say, "Yes, thanks." If that's the only question you ask me, I'm in strife. Maybe you might ask me if I want to have a coffee, and I'd say yes. But if you don't ask me any more questions, you might make the coffee the way you like it. Thanks. Do you want me to answer that for you? No, it's okay. And so I've had that happen myself when I've been preaching. It's my phone that's ringing. No one else is in the place, just my phone. So I remember to turn it off silent this morning because it'll go off at any time. So if you're making me a coffee, but you haven't asked me anything about how I like a coffee, see, I like a coffee with a heap of milk in it. I can't drink it if it's hot. I've got to look after my lips for coral. You understand that, right? And so don't look embarrassed, Theo. I can drink it cold. I can leave it around for an hour and then find it again and get cold, right? Now, if just making a coffee that is nice and enjoyable depends upon asking some good questions to make the right decisions, how much more in life does making or asking good questions help us make better decisions? So we've been doing this series, and it's been based on the latest book of Andy Stanley's, and it's entitled Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets. And over the last 4 weeks, we've looked at 4 questions. So Kath, can you put that slide up? And so the 4 questions are, am I being honest with myself? Really? Like, really, am I being honest with myself? What's the story I want to tell? What's the legacy? What do I want my kids to tell of my story? Is there a tension that deserves my attention? Is there something niggling at you that you need to pay attention to? Just this week, someone here in Redgum was trying to make a significant decision in their life. And it was that little niggle, that little thing inside that they paid attention to that changed the decision they made or helped them make that decision as a decision that would affect other people as well as themselves. And last week was, will this be a wise thing to do? Now, here's the thing about those 4 questions. They are guaranteed to work every single time in any environment. Any time you ask yourself those questions, they will give often an immediate, but they'll give a guaranteed good result. I often have people tell me that they would love to know what God's will for their life is. If you ask those questions, it will position you for God's general will in your life. And it will actually set you up to be sensitive to his specific will. But sometimes just his general will is enough. God can guide you. He can direct you. And especially if you ask the right questions. Now, the 5th question is very, very different to those 4 questions. Because you can ask this 5th question we're going to look at today, and there's no guarantee it'll work. You can do it, you can ask the question, you can do it, and there's no return on the effort and the energy you put into it. You may not see any measurable differences. The first 4 questions are very demanding in the moment. In the moment you ask it, it has a strong demand on your life. But the 5th question, it has a demand on every moment of your life, on every day that you ask it. It's an ugly question because it's not about making your life better. It's about making someone else's life better. And that may or may not benefit you. So why ask it? Because the payoff, the benefits are enormous to families, to friendships. It's a question that will actually help restore friendships, broken relationships. It's really significant between a husband and a wife. In a church, this question is just so powerful. In a workplace. And surprisingly, this 5th question, it actually helps people far from God come to God. In fact, it may be the only thing that changes a skeptical person towards seeing the truth about our God. But here's the thing. The first 4 questions work with or without God. But this 5th question, and it really depends on the God factor. The first 4 questions works for someone that's a Jesus follower, someone that's an atheist. They work. But this 5th one, it's got a really narrow success rate if you don't involve God in this 5th question. So here it is, the 5th and final question of our little series. So I built it up ready to, what's the question? What was that? An ad break? You're bored already. Thanks for just killing the moment, you know. Just if I had Jeff on the drums, it'd be a big drum roll now. Here's the 5th question, right? What does love require of me? Now, I've just got to check for a moment. Kath, have you got a couple of slides to put up in a moment? You know about those, that's fine. Just technical stuff. Okay. What does love require of me? 38 years ago, I shot a big Samba stag with all horns on its head, right? And we had the thing stuffed, and wherever we've lived, wherever we've gone, that thing's gone with us, and it's hung on a wall somewhere in our house. Well, just before Christmas, I went and shot a monster one, bigger than anything that I'd ever got in the last 38 years. And so we've just got it back this week from the taxidermist, and we've hung it in the lounge room. So, Kath, can you put up a slide of that? So that's my little friend, and then just one of the lounge room. So that was my plan of where to hang it. But when it went up on the wall, Coral looked traumatised. And she says, it's like a big cow hanging on the roof, on the wall, right? And I said, well, what do you think? She said, I'm not talking about it. I'm not going to talk about it for 2 days. And so how do we make a decision where it goes? Because I know Coral wants it out in the back room where the boys' grandkids sleep and not there. But I'd planned for it to go there. And I think it looks good there. But Coral doesn't want it there. And we both are asking this question, what does love require of me? Like, out of her love for me, she's willing to sacrifice what she wants so I can have it where I want. What do we do? So I'm going to ask you this morning. We're going to vote, right? So who thinks it should be in the back room where Coral wants it? Hands up. Who thinks it should hang where I've got it? I just lost. Steve, you're in trouble, mate, if you think the same as I'm thinking, right? Because yes. Happy wife, happy life. Yeah. Don't believe everything you hear. Right? Everyone wants to have a go this morning. Who wants a microphone?
It's not in the centre of the wall.
No, it's meant to be. That's room to put a photo of the mountains and stuff where it lived. Yeah. So anyway, Coral, you win. And all the smart people in the room voted Coral's way. And to be honest, I'd already said to her a couple of days ago, we're going to take it off that wall and put it out in the back boys' room, because you can't make the decision based on where's the best place to put it, or even where's the best place it looks to be. You've got to make the question based around what does love require? And love requires me to make a sacrifice that's not that hard for me, but it would be a much greater sacrifice for Coral. It's easier for me to not have it there than it is for Coral to have it where it's hanging at the moment. And so that's where it gets really real if you're going to make a right decision in life, if you can ask this question, what does love require of me? See, we're both asking the same question, but one of us had to give some ground. And so you come to that ground by a genuine question of love, don't we? Now, I'm lost for a moment. If we're going to ask that question, though, it might really help to actually know what love requires. Because when I was asking myself that question, I knew already what the answer was. And so there's a way we can actually understand what love requires, because Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, he just puts it out there. It's that yucky chapter on love, right? But in Andy Stanley's book, he sort of paraphrases it and he puts a little commentary, and I've got Amy coming and she's going to read to us. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 13 in a way that just expands it a little bit.
Love requires patience. Love isn't pushy. Love requires that I move at your pace rather than requiring you to move at mine. Love requires kindness. Kindness is love's response to weakness. Kindness is the choice to loan others our strength rather than reminding them of their weaknesses. It's doing for others what they cannot in that moment do for themselves. Love requires us to keep envy and pride from interfering with our ability to celebrate the success of others. Love requires us to allow others to shine. It isn't threatened by the success of others. Love requires us to show honour to others. Love never treats another person dishonourably, disgracefully, or indecently. Love doesn't create regret. After all, honour is at the heart of every satisfying relationship. Love requires selflessness. Love is not self-seeking or selfish. It puts the interests and needs of others first. That alone would solve most of our relationship problems. Love requires us to address our anger privately rather than allowing it to spill out on the people around us. Love requires us to own it and goes to work on it. Paul says love is not easily angered. It's not easily stirred up or provoked. Instead, love absorbs. Love puts the other person's story ahead of our own. Love requires us to forgive. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Funny thing about relational record keepers, they rarely keep track of their own records. Do you enjoy catching your spouse or significant other messing up? That's messed up. Forgiving and pretending to forget is your best bet. That's what love requires. To do otherwise is a power play. When someone holds your past over you, who's in the elevated position? Love is not about powering up. Love is about stepping down. Paul's final descriptor is best taken together as one big game-changing idea. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love requires us to see and believe the best while choosing to downplay the rest. We might as well believe the best about each other. Nothing is gained by doing otherwise. Love chooses a generous explanation when others don't meet our expectations. Paul says, love always protects. Love requires us to do everything in our power to protect or guard the relationship, Translated, love doesn't smuggle harmful things into a relationship, just the opposite. Love keeps harmful things out. That's quite a list, but that's what love requires.
Thanks, Amy. See, it sounds so nice in theory, doesn't it, right? But we live in a world where stress is real, physical stress, emotional stress, mental stress. There's stuff going on, circumstances in our lives. I don't know if you've ever heard that chapter read at a wedding, but it often gets read at weddings. And it creates this question, what does love require? Well, that's huge. That's massive. But it's not just a question that married couples could ask when they're trying to work out where to hang a deer's head, because most of you wouldn't want one in your house anyway. But it's not a question about those that are relationally in love with each other. That whole chapter, Paul wrote for us. Like it's for us. It's for the church and how we do life together. And it's almost overwhelming because we can't do that in our own strength. It's so demanding. The bar's so high. Most religions, in fact, all religions on planet Earth, don't demand that of those that follow that religion. There's no other demand like that other than what Jesus and Paul has put onto us. And most religions, though, in our world, they include something about the golden rule. You know, do to others as you'd have them do to you. And Jesus mentioned that, but he didn't mention it to tell us to do it. He actually mentioned it in answer to a question, and he summed up after he said what the golden rule was. He says, this is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets. And then in the next breath, Jesus goes on to say, you can enter God's kingdom only through listening and following him. And so he mentioned the golden rule, and then he jumped straight into, but that's not going to work for you. That's not going to get you to God. See, you can keep the golden rule in your own strength. You don't need God for that, because the measuring stick is you. It's treating people how you would treat. You're the measuring stick. You're the standard for the golden rule. Now, I know that most of us in this room, if you've hung around church long enough, if you've read the Bible in some form, you would think that Jesus told us to love God with all our hearts and all our mind and all our soul and all our strength, and to love our neighbour as themselves. But he never told us to do that. That was simply an answer to a question that was meant to trick him when he was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And instead of giving him an answer of one, he gave them two. He linked two together. And just like the golden rule, he finishes his commentary on it by saying that all the law and all the prophets hang in these commands. But he didn't tell us to do it, because Jesus had this much grander plan. And just like the golden rule, that loving God and loving your neighbour bit, love your neighbour as yourself, you're the measuring stick. You're the standard. I enjoy a laugh. And so there's a Facebook group of Aussie jokes. And there was a comment on this Facebook page the other day, and someone put into the comments the fact that they've become a Christian because they were in another country, they saw a person who was blind and begging in the streets, and a few days later they saw, and they were sceptical, right? That complete sceptical person, far from God, and they saw a stranger stop and pray for this blind person, and they were completely healed. So that they're telling the story on this joke site, and then they said, well, I was a skeptic, but now I'm a Christian, and I try to love God and I try to love my neighbour, but I can't stand a lot of Christians. And this person on this joke site got ridiculed. Everyone got stuck into them. Like one person said, sounds like you have an undiagnosed mental illness. And everyone's getting stuck into this person. But see, what they were saying they were doing is not what Jesus said would change our world. He never said miracles would help people see who he is. That telling someone that you're following the old covenant law isn't going to change you or your community. See, Jesus introduced us to a concept that's so out there that many Jesus followers right now today don't know quite what to do with this. See, on the last night that Jesus had with his disciples, where we get communion from, that's the night that he introduced this plan that was so huge that when he told them, they completely ignored it. They changed the subject. And Jesus says, I'm establishing a new covenant. The old covenant is gone. There's a new covenant. And this is going to be how it works. You're going to love one another. And then he set the bar so high, it's impossible. You're going to love one another, and you're going to measure that by how I've loved you. You're not going to be the measuring stick anymore. It's going to be how I've loved you. And I think when they heard that for the first time, Matthew remembered back to when he was working for the opposition. He was employed by the Roman government to take unfair taxes from his fellow countrymen and then I'll take one for the Romans and I'll take one for you and I'll stick that in the back. He was hated by his fellow countrymen. His only friends were other tax collectors. And Jesus looks at him and says, I believe in you. Matthew, can I come to your house, have a coffee with you? Bring all your tax collecting mates. And Jesus got hammered for loving someone no one else loved. I think when Jesus said that's where the bar is, Matthew knew. Whew. I think when Peter heard that, he remembered back to when Jesus first met him and says, Pete, I know you're this, but I see something in you. You're going to be this. You're just blown around as a reed, but you're going to be a rock. See, they knew how Jesus had loved them, and they hadn't yet seen the cross. That was before the cross. But we know on the cross what love really looked like. And that's the bar that Jesus sets. And this new commandment, it's so simple, isn't it? It's just love one another as Jesus loves you. It's so simple. It's so uncomplicated. But it's impossible without a risen Jesus inside us. Otherwise, it can't happen. And he said it's how our world will know we're his disciples. It's this question, what does love require of me? It gives this brilliant clarity to every moral, ethical, relational decision you'll ever face in life. But it's also a question we're tempted to run from. I have a friend, and all his married life, he and his wife have worked on this system. If he spends $200 on whatever he wants to spend, she can spend $200 on what she wants to spend. If he spends $500, she gets to spend $500. They've done that their whole married life. And they've done that to avoid the question, what does love require of me? They've come up with a rule. We're attracted to rules because rules give us wriggle room, don't they? I can remember we were doing this big youth event up in the Bark, and we involved a whole lot of different churches in it. And we had this sort of dance thing that we're doing on stage. We had puppets and we had this dance track and stuff. And there's one church that said, well, we can't be part of that because dance is against. We don't believe in dance. Dance is wrong. But they went and had a talk about it, and they came back and said, no, it's okay. We've made a decision that it's not dance, it's movement to music. See, they had a rule, but rules have wriggle room. We love trying to find the wriggle room in rules, don't we? And so Jesus didn't give us a rule, he gave us a commandment. And there's no wriggle room when it comes to loving where he sets the bar. And it's such an ugly question because when I ask that question of myself, I usually know the answer before I've even asked it. And it's a question that fills up all the gaps. You know, sometimes we try to justify things and we go, well, the Bible doesn't say we shouldn't such and such. Well, it's a question that fills up every gap in every issue you'll ever come across if you ask that question that the Bible's not specific about. And I know that in this room, sitting there with your beautiful, Mel, you look so angelic. You know, you look beautiful sitting there. But see, I know within our humanness, right, we're tempted to ask a different question. We're tempted to ask, what's the least I can do relationally with other Christians to still be a good Christian? What's the least I can do? It's a different question. But when we are confounded by the truth of this question, it's a truth that means that we don't want to seek to win the argument, we want to restore a relationship. And that's a problem for me because I like to be right. And I have a daughter, our oldest daughter. She has the same genetic propensity. She likes to be right. Always. And growing up, many, many times, Coral would say to us, we would say to her, Mandy, you're right, but your response is so wrong, especially when it involved her younger daughter, a younger sister. And it's an ugly question because when you ask it, it may require a phone call to someone saying, I'm sorry. It may mean trying to rebuild a relationship that you've burned over money, over expectations, over someone. Someone might have let you down, and you're right. They did let you down. They did the wrong thing by you. But being right is not what love requires. You may take steps to repair a relationship because you've asked that question. But the other person might not want to have anything to do with you. There's no guarantee when you ask this question and you follow it through, it will change anything. But if we ask that question consistently and often enough, and we do it in God's strength because we can't do it on our own, it will change our families. It will change a parent that's getting frustrated with your child or your teenager. It will change how you respond. It will change life in this church. See, Dennis, my mate Dennis up the back there, if I can show genuine interest in Dennis consistently, always, if I can love him in practical ways, the weirdest thing about that is somewhere people who are far from God and skeptical will actually see that Jesus is who he says he is. It's remarkable. I don't know how it works, but that's what Jesus promised. I want to read you something in just finishing what Jesus said, because there's a payoff to this, right? He said that if we can do this, there's in John chapter 17, it's a prayer, and he says, if you'll do this, then the world, Aussies far from God, may believe that you sent me. And it's such a big concept. Jesus repeats it, and he says this the second time. And this is verse 23 of chapter 17. He says, you live fully in me, and now I live fully in them. He's talking to God. He says, you're in me and I'm in you, and now they have got me in them. so they will experience perfect unity, and the world will be convinced that you sent me. Not arguments. You try to argue someone and prove to them Jesus came back to life, that Jesus is who said he is. You can't win an argument, but you'll change a person by how we love each other. It's weird, isn't it? I don't know if I would have come up with that as the way to do it, but it's the way Jesus came up with it. And he says, and they will experience it, they will be convinced that you sent me, for they will see that you love each other, you love each one of them with the same passion and love that you have for me. They're going to see God's love working when it's just us being really nice to each other. That's bizarre. But can you get the concept? Can you get it? This is really significant. It's everything Jesus hung everything on, this commandment of loving one another. And it's real. And it's ugly. And it's awful. And it's brilliant. And it changes lives. If you walk in these doors for the first time and you don't feel loved, you're not going to hang around. But if you keep being loved, something changes in you. It's Elwyn. Every time you walk in here, I know God is healing, restoring, and setting free. And it doesn't depend upon me, it depends upon us, how we care for you, how you care for us, and express God's love in you for us. That's how it works. It's amazing. Let's pray. God, I thank you that it's your love in us. It's you in us. It's a risen Jesus in us that makes this even possible. And it's so practical. And it's so real. And so life-changing. And it beats every argument. It's not the miracles down the main street. It's not what we believe. It's not what we worship style. It's not how we dress. It's not a dress code. It's love for each other that changes us, changes our world. So help us ask this question often, repeatedly. What does love require of me when we're making any decision, any response? With people we're really familiar with people we've never met before. What does love require of me? What does love require of me? I thank you for your strength that we can actually do that. That we aren't the bar setter, you are. But you're the enabler, we're not. We do it in your strength. Thank you, Lord. Thank you.